Welcome to the show. It's Blue Gold Week. It's IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and running. Glad to have you with us today, along with Jesse Stiers. I am Sean Stiers. We've got a little bit of a switcheroo. Jesse and Vince have swapped days this week, so we start the day with someone better looking than the other one. So that's always a plus. I kid, just in case Vince happens to be sitting in the chat right now or listening after the fact, but hope you're having a good one. I tell you what, we've had about, I don't even know what the swing in temperatures has been. 2 nights ago, I was sitting on my couch, like starting to sweat, wondering if we needed to crack on the AC that night. And then this morning I get up and there's a dusting of snow on the ground, and it's been like blowing wind all day and in the 30s. So welcome to South Bend. You got to love it. It's not going to be quite this cold this Saturday for the Blue Gold game, but it's going to be a little bit chilly out there for what I've seen in the forecast.
Yeah, we had our windows open all weekend, and then last night woke up this morning and I was freezing cold, and as we talk, there is snow falling on the ground right now. So interesting times.
Yes. Well, we count down to Saturday's Blue Gold game, the end of spring football practice. We got to hear from Fighting Irish head coach Marcus Freeman after a live scrimmage they had inside Notre Dame Stadium Saturday. By the way, speaking of the Blue Gold game, if you're coming to the game this Saturday and you haven't been over to campus recently, this has nothing to do with the weather. Get there early if you want to get a parking spot, because they've got the entire Joyce parking lot just south of Purcell Pavilion / the Joyce Center. It is completely ripped up and under construction. That whole main parking lot there, south of Purcell, the Joyce lot, is torn up. It is closed down. So that's a huge, probably a couple thousand parking spaces that you've got in there that will be unavailable Saturday. So, if you're like Vince and you get there 5 minutes before kickoff, you might be walking. you might be getting there 15 minutes after kickoff. So just beware of that. You might want to get there early if you're planning on. But if you're going to tailgate, you're going to get there early anyway. But it's going to be a little bit harder to come by a parking spot. You might have to walk a ways. So beware of that. Be ready to go. You're going to be in Atlanta this weekend, aren't you?
Yeah, I'll be down in Atlanta for a wedding, and that's a large reason why Vince and I switched days this week. Busy schedule on Tuesday and Thursday, flying actually on Thursday. So, we'll be down there. Some of our friends attended Georgia Tech. That's where they met, and then they're getting married down in Atlanta because that's like where they went to school and where they met.
That sounds real exciting. Good luck with that.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Derek's I put on the wrong one. Is it all ripped up between Purcell and Compton? Karen asks. Good question, Karen. Only the Joyce lot, so like that first main lot directly south of Purcell is the one that is ripped up. And then you kind of have that, there's like that intermediate area. And then Compton, that parking lot, the Compton lot is open. That one is open. It is just the Joyce lot. I don't know what they even call the Compton lot. Is it called the Compton lot? But that one is open, but it is just that Joyce lot. And they put a stop sign in there on that street that enters there. And where that stop sign is, it would be north of the stop sign. It is all torn up. And then south of the stop sign toward Compton, that is an open parking lot. So it is just that main, big Joyce lot that I'm talking about. Derek says he's parking at my house. If you park at my house, it'll take you an hour and a half probably to walk to the stadium. So we used to live a lot closer. It would have taken you maybe 20 minutes or so to walk, but not now. So maybe I should just go get a bus and run a shuttle out there this weekend.
Do you have enough grass that you could park at least 20 cars?
That's true. That's true. Rent a van. I bet I could actually make a little bit of money off that if I ran a shuttle. All right. Well, a couple of notes. Speaking of the blue gold game, Marcus Freeman said Prince Kollie in concussion protocols. So, there was some hand wringing about Prince Kollie because we hadn't seen him for a couple of practices. What's going on with him? As soon as you don't see someone for a little bit and there's no tangible news on him, everyone assumes,
The worst.
Not even injury the worst. They assume that a guy's going to transfer right away. So Prince Kollie in concussion protocols, according to Marcus Freeman. So hopefully he is better, but it doesn't sound like he's going to play this week. Freshman cornerback Christian Gray had a knee scope, and then another freshman early enrollee, Ben Minnick, had a thumb procedure. So none of those guys are going to play this Saturday. So unfortunately, we won't be able to see any of them. Yes, you're absolutely right, Anthony. Dealing with Notre Dame fans, and I mean probably every fan base goes through it, but Prince Kollie, quote unquote, just concussion protocol again, like it not overlooking the severity of concussion, but at least can kind of put some minds to rest that it's nothing bigger picture than that right now. And yes, DJ, thank you very much for that reminder. I haven't even gotten to smashing the like button. I do appreciate you bringing that up. It, of course, helps out Irish Breakdown. And subscribe, rate, and review, and all that good stuff on your podcast platforms as well. And leave a comment if you want to as well. So Freeman said the offense won the scrimmage Saturday. They had a little scrimmage out there at Notre Dame Stadium on what was a beautiful day inside Notre Dame Stadium Saturday. And there were some highlights posted to Notre Dame social media. Nice offensive highlights. You had Sam Hartman scoring on the little touchdown bolt to the corner of the end zone. You had the beautiful looking pass, the dime that he dropped to Chris Tyree on a throw down field. Those were some of the highlights. But how does it register to you, Jess, I guess, first of all, to hear that the offense won the day Saturday afternoon?
To me, that's better than hearing that the defense won the day. And honestly, like talking, thinking about when we participated in kind of full team scrimmages, there's and this might be some bias on my side, but they're set up in a way where I feel like the offense should win. And so if the offense isn't winning, I feel like it's not necessarily a good thing. So you want to hear that the offense is progressing, especially with a lot of the new faces. New face at quarterback, new face at offensive coordinator, new face at quarterback coach, new offensive line coach, some new guys at wide receiver. Like there's just a lot of new things. And so when you hear that the offense won the day, and knowing kind of, how good the defense was, ended up being last year, and a lot of the stuff that you've heard, coming out of practices that the defense has looked, pretty much a little bit better in some regards than the offense. It's good to hear that they won, but again, when I played, there's, you can't touch the quarterback. There's only certain proximities you can get within.
Right.
And so you want to hear that the offense is winning because, again, I feel like at least it's set up for the offense to win. And so if they don't win when it's set up to win, then that's not a good sign.
The Phil Jurkovec rules of spring football, where if you breathe on the quarterback, he's sacked, and you tick off Phil Jurkovec, and he gets very upset about the fact that he was not allowed to run and, avoid sacks and all that different kind of stuff. I'll tell you what, Al Golden, I think he took 5 questions at his press conference, because they did Marcus Freeman, then Al Golden came in after Marcus Freeman, then Jared Parker came in after that. Freeman talked for like 25 to 30 minutes. Al Golden was no joke. He was up there for like 5, and Jared Parker probably took at least twice as many questions. Al Golden did not seem like he was a happy man when he stepped up there to the podium, just kind of based on his facial expressions, the tone of his voice, and the shortness of some of his answers. So, he looked like he took it a little bit personally, maybe that the offense got the best of him. And, I think you mentioned it. This spring, from what we've seen, the defense has had a little bit more of the upper hand, and we'll get to some of that with some of the sound that we're going to play from Marcus Freeman. So I was a little bit surprised because it's from what Marcus Freeman said when he kind of went through how the scrimmage went off the top of his press conference, that the offense actually got out to a really comfortable early lead. And he did say it was one of those complicated scoring systems. So who knows exactly what all that entails? Like, did you convert a third down? Maybe that gives you some points or something like that. There weren't a lot of sacks, he said, all those different things. So I was a little bit surprised to see, to hear how sort of easily the offense was able to do it out there, and would have liked to be able to see that, because as we turn this now and talk specifically about the quarterbacks, like, is there a switch that went on for Sam Hartman? Maybe?
I was getting ready to say that was kind of leading me to a thought I have is, is Sam Hartman just one of those gamer type of guys? Like, does he struggle a little bit with the monotony of practice, and considering
especially spring practice?
Right, yeah. Spring practice is probably his 5th or 6th spring.
The 6th. He was an early enrollee at Wake. This is the 6th time he has gone through spring practice.
Right, so it's like a little vanilla, a little boring, and I'm sure he couldn't wait to get to an actual scrimmage where he could let it rip. Things. And the thing is, too, at practice, everything is so scripted, right? It's defense is running this, and the offense is going to, work on this based on that. And that used to frustrate me so much, is because, like, as a defense, we'll be like, oh, the offense is trying something out today. And it's like, okay, well, we haven't prepared for this. And the offense knows what our base defense is and what we've been doing all spring.
Sure.
And so when you're just sitting back there getting to try new things out, well, it's like, okay, well, you guys are prepared for this and we're not. And so when practice is scripted and certain things, certain sides of the ball are trying certain things, it's easier for that, offense, defense to have a clear advantage. And I think the scrimmage showed a little bit of, who Hartman is as a baller or a gamer, and that it probably wasn't as scripted. And I think that is also something that probably benefited him as well, just going out there and letting it rip, because, spring is a very vanilla thing. And as his 6th spring, I'm sure that he's not been bored a little bit, but I'm sure he's been anxious to kind of let it rip and let things go off script a little bit.
This is the unfortunate anniversary of the 10-year anniversary of the Patriots Day bombing and at the Boston Marathon in Boston, but it is also that season the Red Sox, of course, went on to win the World Series. And I was watching, I've got the extra innings package, and I was watching the end of the Red Sox game, and they went right into a whole retrospective of that 2013 season with the Red Sox. And it started off, David Ortiz was like chilling and not doing much at spring training, and some guy came up to him. He's like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Look, I'm an old man. I'm resting right now. I'm picking my spots." And it's like, same thing, Sam Hartman. Just like you said, year 6, spring. I don't know, but as Anthony said, that would have been a little bit more informative for everybody had we seen that. But hey, we'll get to see some live action this Saturday at the Blue Gold game. But we did get we've got some comments from Marcus Freeman from his press conference after that scrimmage Saturday, starting with what he said about naming a starting quarterback.
When I'm fully confident we have one starting quarterback. I think both of them could be starting quarterbacks for us right now. They're both improving and they're both getting better. So if you can have a competition, right, and 2 guys are getting better, that's what you want, right? That's what you want, and they're both getting better and they're both practicing at a high level. So we'll name a starter at some point. I know we have to. I don't plan to let this thing go into the season. But at some point, I know we have to name a starter, and we will.
Yes, at some point you do have to name a starter. That's like part of the deal, I guess, unless you're going to try to play Brian Kelly and split it down the middle, like 2016 with Kaiser and Zaire. But he's not naming one anytime soon. At least not in the next week before spring ends. I mean, not really a surprise, is it?
No, that's not something that's overly surprising to me. Spring again is all about competition. and leaving the depth chart kind of open. Like guys know based on how they perform, got feedback they're getting, kind of where they overall stand. And you'll have probably, at the end of every spring, there's going to be what are called like exit interviews before, the summer, before there's a little bit of time off for the summer and before they come back and, really get it dialed in for the fall. And so again, it keeps everyone's confidence, everyone's enthusiasm up, just knowing that they're, even if it is kind of defined who might, be the starter, who might not be, there's still that ambiguity because I think it allows guys to come in and compete harder every day. And I think that's what ultimately the culture that Marcus Freeman wants to breed is that competitive every day, bringing your competition, bringing your best and having to work for everything. So it's no surprise to me. And just because he mentioned quarterbacks, I'm sure that goes for every position on the depth chart. That's not just a quarterback thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, season opener is August 26th. So how far into camp would you be comfortable with not having a decision on this?
I think as long as someone is announced before the end of camp, I would be okay with that. I don't think it needs to be something again. I'm just going to leave it at that. I think by the end of camp, that's ultimately when kind of everything should be decided because you have the proper preparation going into it. It's no longer, spring camp or fall camp. We are now in game week mode. We are preparing for our opponent. It needs to be very, those positions need to be identified at that point, who's at where on the roster, and that sort of thing. So I think doing it right as fall camp concludes is where I would feel comfortable.
And it's a 0-week game as well. So I'm going to imagine, and I haven't heard specifically on this, this might be something we can check on this week or this weekend. I would imagine, like typically fall camp starts around the start of the second week of August. I imagine they're going to start a little bit, you'll be able to start earlier than that this year. And then they have 2 byes during the week as well. I think my comfort level would be probably 2 weeks at the longest, because when you are preparing for an actual game, you do need to start figuring out, okay, who's getting the majority of the reps and all that kind of stuff, who's actually running the offense and those things. And I mean, look, I get this is fairly legitimate. DC Irish 1213 says there is no quarterback competition! Exclamation point. Don't let anyone fool you. Hartman will win the job, and Buckner will either decide to leave and transfer out somewhere or will be the backup. I lean towards him transferring. All right, I'll take the first part first. There is no quarterback competition, is what he says. I would argue that it is at least as much a quarterback competition as Jack Cohn versus Tyler Buckner was, and then Tyler Buckner versus Drew Pine was. All the things that you just talked about, Jesse, the spirit of competition. It might be a fairly foregone conclusion, but at least as far as they're concerned, they are treating it like it is an actual competition. Do you believe that it is an actual competition, or is it just a foregone conclusion to get to the announcement of Sam Hartman as soon as possible in August?
I don't think it's a competition, and I don't think there's any rush to get to any sort of announcement. And this is an age-old kind of debate conversation that, ever since Hartman was announced that he's transferring here, where does that put, everyone else not named Sam Hartman within the ranks of the depth chart? And again, you just don't make this kind of move and go after someone with this much experience and knowing, what he's trying to accomplish as well, in preparation for the NFL, if he's not going to be your starter. And I don't think that, again, that means Tyler Buckner is going to get 0 snaps or any playing time. So I do think that there is going to be a role for Tyler Buckner. How big or small they make that when they decide to use him, within certain personnel packages on the field, that's up to them. But again, I don't think that there's a competition, and I think Sam Hartman is definitely, I'm 99% sure that Hartman is going to be the starter. But again, you just don't announce those things because you want Tyler Buckner to make as much as you want Tyler Buckner to develop as much as possible. And what you do to help him to develop as much as possible is not put him in the second string seat as soon as camp starts, because you want him to have that fire to go after the potential starting spot still. And so I think it's only going to make Tyler Buchner compete harder. It's going to push Hartman harder. And it's just overall going to make the team better when you don't announce something like this up front.
One of the indirect results of bringing in a guy with Sam Hartman's experience is the fact that you can have this competition in the spring, and you can, everything that you said, that you can motivate Tyler Buchner to get better, and he has someone both to learn from and to compare himself to as he goes through this whole thing. And I mean, look, we've seen it season after season after season. It is very rare that you get through an entire season with one guy as the quarterback. More likely than not, even if Sam Hartman, do we think Sam Hartman's going to be the starter? Sure we do. But more likely than not, you're going to need Tyler Buchner at some point, whether that's, like Tyler Buchner package or situationally or whatever, or, something, look at Hartman last year at Wake Forest. They needed another quarterback when he was there last year. And, in terms of the transferring thing, none of us know exactly. It is always such an individual thing, person to person, like whether or not you're going to transfer or whether you're going to stay and battle it out, all those different things for the long haul. Tyler Buchner, still is going to have multiple seasons of eligibility remaining after this year. So in terms of the transfer thing, again, it'll be an individual decision for him, but once you get into the season, there's no benefit to him by, like pulling the ripcord, like in fall training camp, for example. It's not like he can go someplace else and play right away. And two, even like if you rewind it, reel it back even before that, I think if Tyler Buchner was going to go somewhere as a result of Sam Hartman coming in, it was going to be last December, like Drew Pine. Like, I think that's when he would have left if that was his inclination, because even if Hartman ends up being the guy this year, then again, Buchner has multiple years of eligibility remaining after that. And, he stands to be the starting quarterback a year from now. So again, like, I can't tell you what his decision is going to be, but I just think if he was going to leave, he would have already been gone right now, because he knew that Sam Hartman was coming in, just like Drew Pine knew Sam Hartman was coming in. I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I do concur with a lot of what you were saying. And I like the comment that DT Roll Hunter kind of brought up recently, saying that Sam should want it to be a competition too, because it does make him better. And ultimately, that's what competition does, is it makes everyone better. No matter if this was Hartman's, third year, fourth year, fifth year, sixth year, there's always room to get better. And I'm sure that there's stuff that, Buchner does that pushes Hartman to want to be like, wow, I need to tune that up, or I want to be, I want to be able to do something like that. So I really like the aspect of the competition. I also like this comment too. Everyone jumps to negative thoughts in terms of
jump right to that conclusion. Like, everyone thinks as soon as something goes, like the road gets a little bit bumpy for a player, everyone thinks that everyone's going to jump into the transfer portal right away.
Right. And so this is just a natural thing that comes with, being an athlete at a top tier football program. Not everyone gets to start. And there are times where you kind of just have to take the back seat and get better. And that's got to be Buchner's mentality, is how can I get better in this situation, and not, pity me, why me kind of situation. And I'm not saying that's what Buchner does at all. And I think that he's done everything that he should to, just continue to work on his game and take things in stride.
And Tommy Gunn says he'd be perfectly fine with him naming the starter internally, but not announcing it publicly, just rolling out with him against Navy. I would have no problem with that as well. Just like, when Tyler Buchner didn't play in the spring game last year, I said at the time, it wasn't the worst thing in the world for Notre Dame, because the game is televised. No one got to see what a regular Tyler Buchner offense could look like. And, it wasn't the worst thing. And now you do have quarterbacks with two different skill sets. So I wouldn't have a problem with that either. Like, I know that it would cause a lot of people a lot of distress, and they couldn't go, they couldn't live without knowing who the starting quarterback was going to be going into that game. But I think, strategically, it would not be a bad move at all to keep that under wraps. But I've got a feeling that we're gonna. I like if we set an over under on a week into training camp, I would not be shocked if it is under, just like it has been the last couple of years when a starter has been named, because they've gotten it out of the way early and then moved on with their preparation for the season opener. Okay, so looking at the Irish Breakdown premium boards this weekend, there's apparently this narrative floating around out there from at least one other outlet that Sam Hartman is struggling this spring. So now, again, the media has been to 2 practices where we've seen anything live. We've seen, like the stretching, and some of those 5-period practices where you basically see some drills and stuff like that, maybe a little one-on-one, or I don't even think we saw 7-on-7s at the 5-period practices, but we've seen 2 practices where we've seen live stuff. Is that enough to base an opinion like that on?
There's nowhere near enough time to base an opinion on. Again, we're talking about very scripted practices, and the fact that I know the one was full. Was the first practice actually a full practice in length that you got to see, or was it just like the first hour of practice?
So you're saying the very first time we got to see something, or
Yeah, this spring.
no? The first couple were the 5 periods, and then I think 2 weeks ago, Saturday, was the full open practice. And then like a week and a half later, this past Wednesday, maybe that was 3 weeks, I don't even know. In the last like 2.5 weeks, I think we've seen the 2 practices.
Right. So, I mean, these are 1, spring practices, and 2, you're not seeing every practice, and 3, they're scripted practices. So there's no way that anyone could come to the logical conclusion that Sam Hartman is struggling. And to me, if someone wants to start that narrative, they're just looking for something to kind of get clicks, unfortunately. And that's kind of
Well, do
a
people
trend
do that?
yeah, I was going to say that's a trend that is very largely going around right now, is just kind of saying, controversial things that are going to get clicks, no matter if there's a little bit of truth, no truth, or, full on truth. So I just don't think that you can make that statement, with Sam's background, without seeing him play in an actual live game, or maybe even the spring game. Like I wouldn't even trust if it came out after the spring game. I would have to see it full on against another opponent, live time, game situation.
Yeah. Again, 2 practices trying to come to some overlying conclusion, conclusive, this guy is struggling. I just don't see it, because again, we're talking about 2 snapshots over, I think it's 10 practices that they've had now. And again, it's like they're not even practicing every day. It's right around every other day, basically. And so to say he's struggling, I think is completely off the mark. Like, we're all going to watch the blue gold game this Saturday, no matter what, good or bad. We're going to see things, and there's going to be, there's going to be overreactions to it, good and bad. What happened last year?
Monday.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler Buchner didn't, yeah, exactly. A week from today, overreaction Monday based on the blue gold game. Last year, Buchner didn't play. Drew Pine wasn't great. Steve Angeli led the late touchdown drive against a bunch of walk-ons and third stringers, and all of a sudden he's Joe Montana, right? Like, it's human nature to overreact, but I just don't fall prey to the Mike Greenberg effect, i.e. don't be a prisoner of the moment, especially when you're talking about a couple of practices in the spring. They are spring practices. And like you said, Jess, they are scripted. They are working on specific things. So I just, there is not nearly enough body of evidence to say struggling. To say he is struggling, I don't buy it. Now, you can say maybe the offense as a whole, like they're not moving the ball. We haven't seen a whole lot from the offense in the times they've been there. But, from what we've been told and what we've seen, they've also been working on certain things, all the blitzes and all that different stuff that we've talked about. So I guess my question to you is, like, what would struggling look like, considering we're talking about a sixth-year quarterback, and it's a a period of 4 hours that you'd be basing that conclusion on, that a guy would be struggling.
Yeah, so for me, what that would look like specifically at the quarterback position, because I think you have to consider, not the offense as a whole, but what is the quarterback controlling, and that sort of stuff. So struggling to me would be not getting the offense set up right, not going through, I guess, not having an understanding of kind of, the playbook, or where guys are supposed to be on the field, or kind of like, forgetting to pre-snap motion a guy, or, maybe specifically when it comes to throwing, just not being on the same page as the wide receiver, maybe throwing a ball at his feet, not having the route, be timed up correctly, overthrown balls, underthrown balls. To me, a lot of bad quarterback play would be the timing of stuff. And that can be, again, overthrown balls, underthrown balls, not throwing to the spot to where the wide receiver is supposed to be, not reading the coverage and understanding, where the wide receiver is going to, because a lot of these routes have built-in choice routes. So if a certain coverage is shown, a wide receiver might run a dig route, or he might run a go route. So just knowing based off coverage where the wide receiver is supposed to be, and then getting the ball to him on time, in stride, that kind of stuff. And then on a more global level, again, of just having the play set up to where it's supposed to be, putting the offense in the position pre-snap to snap the ball and have the play run successfully.
Yeah, if you want to see struggling, the definition of struggling, look at the first half of the Cal game last season. Like that is struggling. And, a couple of people have made some good points. So, like DT, struggling would be not doing well in 7-on-7s or with, 1-on-1 drills. Absolutely. Like if he's throwing the ball into the ground, or, sailing it, into the sideline or into the stands during those kind of drills, what we've seen from him, it's not like, and just erratic, throwing interceptions, all those different things. Neither one of these guys is doing those kind of things. We're not seeing, just like, poor mechanics on the throws, and like short hopping the ball into there's, have we seen a couple overthrows? Yeah, we've talked about those, but they have mostly come, like to Chris Tyree in the first practice, the first fully open practice that we talked about, and like I still wonder, like getting used to throwing to a smaller guy, but like he sure was on the money on the deep route to Chris Tyree the other day. And it's just, like I just don't see it. One, it's the body of work is not, not the body of work, but the sample size is not there to base that kind of opinion on. And the play just has not been erratic. It has not been erratic by any means. It's mostly been some of the stuff you're talking about. I think that, it's like what we've seen from him has more to do with still getting used to a new system, a new coaching staff, a new set of receivers that he hasn't worked with before. A lot of them very young, 3 early enrollee freshmen, and the others guys who haven't seen the field that much, So like, how much do you think that factors into it? Just the fact that this, for as veteran as Sam Hartman is, that this is all relatively new to him. Like even if this is his 6th spring, it's still a very new environment, new setting for him, new cast of characters this spring.
That's a very, we talked about, the defense going through its 3rd coordinator in, 3 seasons last year. That goes for Sam Hartman, being in a system for pretty much his whole career, and then switching over, and then being hit with a new offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, offensive line coach, and then all the while trying to get some of these younger, inexperienced wide receiver group up to speed as well. Like there's a lot of things that have to be synchronized together, and I think that is something that shouldn't go unnoticed. I think that's going to be a challenge, and probably going to be, determine the overall success this season offensively wise, is how synchronized can Hartman get with the offense, and then how synchronized can he get with this rather inexperienced group of wide receivers.
Yeah, exactly. So Freeman was also asked what he's seen from the offense this spring, and he wasn't asked specifically about Hartman, but he uses an example that includes Hartman.
Progression and show them what progression means. Are you taking drills? Are you taking examples from practice 1 or practice 2 and improving in practice 8 and 9. And one of those examples was a third down play in practice 6. Sam Hartman versus cover 2. It was a third down. He's looking to Tobias. I think it's Tobias on the sideline. And they weren't on the same page. There was a lack of trust, right, between Tobias and Sam and Tobias. And then practice 8 or 9, the exact same situation came up, third down, the exact same defensive call, and there was a completion. Why? Because trust is built. We're learning, we're progressing, and that's what you want to see. You want to see, are there drills we're doing on practice 2, are they being implemented in real situations? And so all those things matter.
Yeah, and like when you hear that, it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. Like spring, as you can attest to, Jesse, spring is not necessarily about the result all the time. And you always hear the process and all that kind of stuff, process versus outcome and all those things. But literally, it's like spring is just about trying to get better. It's not like you're trying to get to a point where you're going to win a football game in a couple of weeks. That's still months away. Can you be incrementally better within the system that you were learning? And, what does that tell you when you hear that?
Yeah. So what you're overall looking at in spring is just a progression of, did you make the same mistakes in practice 2, in practice 5, and in practice 8? Like, are you compounding mistake on mistake? And if it's the same mistakes, that's what's detrimental, because obviously something is not getting through to you. Spring is about taking your toolbox as a player and sharpening all of your tools, and maybe swapping out a better hammer for a better hammer, or a better screwdriver for a better screwdriver. Like, it's all about just getting better individually, so then as a whole you are better at the end of everything, because it doesn't matter, who wins offense versus defense, because it's the same offense and the same defense every practice, every week. You know what's coming. And so when it's set up like that, again, it's just, what are you doing to get better? How are you getting better? And then overall, the more players that get better overall, well, that's just only going to make the team overall better. So that's got to be the emphasis of spring practice, is how are you progressing as a player? Are you going from like a 70 overall to an 80 overall, or are you stuck on 70 because you keep making the same mistake that you were making before? And again, I go back to it often, but there was a guy that I was competing with for linebacker, and in practice 2, he was lining up in the wrong spot, and in practice 8, he was lining up in the wrong spot. So he just, you can't be trusted to be out there if you can't even, do the same thing. You can't correct what you were told to correct, 3-4 practices ago.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you can't correct it from practice 1 to practice 8, you would hope that you're going to be able to correct it from rep 1 to rep 8 in the same practice. And, again, like, those aren't the kind of things that we're seeing from Sam Hartman. It's none of that kind of stuff. It's really, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Is there just, like a gamer switch that goes on for this guy? Because again, we didn't get to see, anything other than what we got on that highlight package, but it sure sounded like things went pretty well for him out there. You haven't seen, the interceptions, the turnovers, any of that kind of stuff. So I don't know. DT says, I want to get into the battle for number 3. Yeah. Unfortunately, those handful of reps that we see between Angeli and Minchie, like, if you want to say that, like, what we've seen from 1 and 2 isn't enough to fully base these opinions on, then what we're seeing from 3 and 4 ain't even close. So unfortunately for that, but I mean, you see some talent. All 4, we've talked about this quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. All 4 of these guys, 1 through 4, really good looking quarterback room, really good looking. Best overall 1 through 4 talent I can remember in a long, long time here at Notre Dame. So, that's a good sign just in itself that you've got that 1 through 4. So this takes us now into the wide receivers a little bit. Freeman, again, he press conference after practice Saturday, and he was asked what he needs to see from this group by the time training camp rolls around.
You know what? Precision, right? It is exact details, and what happens when you are precise and you're exact in your alignments and your route running. Now there's a trust built between the quarterback and the wideouts. Right now you see a lot of times our quarterbacks, and we've gotten tremendously better over 11 practices, at times are waiting to see them open before they throw it instead of trusting and knowing exactly where that wideout's going to be. And so they have to continue to develop. They've developed a tremendous amount. Coach Stuckey's done a great job with that room. Those 3 freshmen are all practicing at a much higher level than when they came in. And so as you see this progression get into August, just continue to improve. And how do you improve? Not just your skill set, but the exact details of the position. And then that trust is built between the wideouts and the quarterback.
So you've got a converted running back in the group. You've got 3 early enrollees. You got a group of receivers who are basically all sophomores in terms of their experience. And like when I say that, I know Deion Colsey's a junior, but he has 13 catches for a little more than 200 yards in 2 years, and the whole group is working with the guy who just transferred in. The incumbent only played in 3 games last year. So how big a factor is all of that for these guys?
Yeah, I think it's honestly a lot because, kind of what I was touching on just a little bit earlier, like this is a new quarterback and a new system with not a lot of like wide receiver experience for the quarterback to fall back on. Like I'm sure that Sam Hartman, it would take a little bit of the pressure off him if he had, maybe a 3-4 year wide receiver who, like a Michael Mayer essentially, or
His
like a Michael,
net.
Yeah, just like a safety net of someone where, hey, I know if I'm having a bad day or having a bad practice, I have a guy that I can fall back onto and get the ball to in maybe some of these tough situations. And I think Marcus Freeman brought up the most important point when talking about, these wide receivers. They have to be so precise. Like Sam Hartman has to trust that even though that they're young and inexperienced, that they're going to run the right route so he knows he can put the ball there. Because if he can't trust that he can put the ball there, well, then he's going to start second guessing, and he's going to maybe put the ball there a little late, a little early. And that's what's going to lead overall to, I think, interceptions or maybe bad plays, is guys not being, precise. And Freeman talked about it, and you brought it up too, is like it's such a young group that has no real kind of proven statistics to back him up. And I think, again, that's going to be the hardest challenge this year, is who is going to step up and be that guy. And what's unfortunate too is the guy that they kind of brought in, to be that older veteran experience is no longer with the team now too. So I think that's also a setback within itself, because you don't have someone who can take over and lead the room. Essentially, they're waiting on who is going to be that guy this year, who's going to step up and be the leader of the wide receiver group, and really kind of help Sam Hartman out in his transition of, what this offense is, and a transition from an offense that he's run, in the past, because this offense is way different than what he's run in prior.
Yeah, exactly. And all that stuff that you're talking about is not stuff that can be solved in 10 practices. Like it just takes time. They have to get used to one another. And again, it's not like you're seeing a receiver like he's supposed to be running a dig and he's running a go or any of this kind of stuff. And I believe they've simplified some of this stuff too, like just in terms of, like how, routes and, all these different things are going to be done, but the summer is going to, I think that is where you're going to see, and we saw it, think about Deshaun Kaiser a few years back, Deshaun Kaiser looked horrible in the spring. And obviously when Malik Zaire goes down, Deshaun ends up stepping up and he has a massive season, and all that. Like the summer is going to really be where these guys, I think, connect and get on the same page, because even though it won't be, officially practice and all that kind of stuff out there, they'll be out running routes, throwing the balls to each other. They'll get, a lot different level of comfort with each other, I think, over the course of June and July before training camp ever starts.
Yeah, and that's the prime time for quarterbacks and wide receivers to get on the same page, because all you're doing is going out there and just running routes together. You're getting a feel for one another. You're understanding that connection. And I think that's going to be honestly the most important time. Like, yeah, the spring is, what it is. And you want to get better and see the progress that Marcus Freeman was talking about. But like, these guys need to get on a page, of their own. And that's why you see so many NFL quarterbacks and wide receivers and running backs training together in the offseason before, camp starts and all that stuff, because it's important. And I think that's going to be the most beneficial time for Sam Hartman and these wide receivers, is just hanging out on campus together, getting to know each other, and then just going out and basically playing kind of pickup football, just throwing routes to each other, and just having a real, like, essentially a good time with it. Like, it's something that should be fun. And then by the time you get to spring, it's like, fall camp, it's like, okay, now it's time to actually, do this for real and show what we got and go against a live defense. But really looking forward to how it all comes together, between Sam Hartman and these wide receivers that have, like, if you're a wide receiver at Notre Dame right now, you should be giddy because it's an open door. Like, literally anyone can take over at this point. Freshman, right, sophomore, junior, whoever you might be, the door is wide open. And so, if you have the talent and you have that, that drive to want to take that spot, I think now is the ample opportunity for someone to really step up and take charge of the wide receiver room.
Yeah. Anthony says he thinks that Tobias is the alpha male, and I don't doubt that at all. Again, like, we haven't seen that when we've been there, but we've seen plenty of highlights that say Tobias has stepped up and made some crazy catches, when we haven't been out there to see it, so just because we haven't been there doesn't, and it's, again, it's the same, like, going back to the whole quarterback conversation, how you're evaluating these guys. You're basing everything on 2 practices as opposed to all this other time that those guys have been out there. And as Michael says, Hartman can make this young wide receiver room better also, and is going to be part of it. And again, a big part of it is just getting out there and doing all that stuff you're just talking about in the summer. Like, he will, I think, eventually make this group better. It's just that, it's not going to happen by practice 10 in the spring, when it took over, a month and a half after he got here on campus, not even, like, within a month and a half, like, he didn't know what the offense was going to be until a couple of weeks before spring started, because the offensive coordinator obviously left, and you got a new offensive coordinator, and they start tweaking some things. And, so I think that's probably has to play into this as well. They're still figuring some things out, from that end. And, and it's like, there's just all the different things we've heard say that, this stands to be really exciting in terms of, like, you've wanted to see some change offensively from this program for several years, and now you're going to have a chance to see it potentially. So I think there's much more potential good than bad with all this stuff. It's just, you're just not going to have the answers in the spring. I'm more excited about what happens when the calendar hits August, and then we'll just be saying, how much are we going to get to see before the season starts? So I don't know. Jesse, we've got much more to cover. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for the rapid fire.
All right, let's do it. So Lorenzo Styles, he's been a topic of conversation recently. And that, of course, came up with Marcus Freeman. And we got to see that dose of Lorenzo Styles and that experiment with him at cornerback last week. And here's Marcus Freeman talking about that.
He can do it gives others opportunities, right? And so if Jack Kaiser is a one position guy, we know Jack Kaiser is going to be on the field. And if he's a one position guy, well, the guy behind him, and might be a younger guy, isn't going to get an opportunity.
Okay, that was the wrong bite. So unfortunately, that was Marcus Freeman talking about Jack Kaiser instead of Lorenzo Styles. So let me, I do have one more Lorenzo Styles soundbite that I was going to play, if I can find it here real quickly. So Freeman was asked whose idea it was to try Styles at cornerback. Let's try this one.
It was my, coming from my background, I told him I see a lot of traits that he possesses that really could resonate on the defensive side of the ball. But I want it to be his decision. I want him to feel good about, what position he's playing. And so I said, hey, if you want to experiment a little bit, play a little bit of DB on one-on-ones, like play man. And now he did it in high school. And I know a lot of people from where he's from in Columbus, Ohio, and they said he was a dang good DB in high school. And so I've always just kind of, put that carrot in his ear. But it was him ultimately that said, okay, hey, I want to try it. I want to try it, Coach. I know you've said it and you said it. And we'll see after next week what we decide to do with him.
All right, Jess. So let's start with this. Does the fact that this idea came from Marcus Freeman affect how you think about this experiment?
I think that it would only affect me in a positive way because of, what he kind of prefaced that clip with is with my background and, what I've heard, about you during the recruiting, because he's from Columbus, Ohio. So Marcus Freeman, that guy, he's been on Freeman's radar for probably a long time, even before, he got to Notre Dame. I don't know when those two lined up. I don't know if Lorenzo was here technically a year before Freeman, if they were in the same, coming in together. But either way, Freeman's known about Styles. He's heard about Styles. And I think with the defensive background and knowing, what Marcus Freeman was able to accomplish defensively, if he says that someone is, has the traits of what it is to be a good corner, I think that it only makes me feel more confident in kind of what he's saying and the potential of, Styles being a good coverage corner.
Yeah, I like how Marcus Freeman said it was his idea, but he also, kind of put it out there for Styles and wanted it to be his decision ultimately. It's like you hear that about some people. It's like, well, they've got to think it's their idea, to really buy into it. And, so he kind of floated this whole thing. I think the fact that it did start with Freeman, though, kind of puts, more into it than, because he started off saying, well, it was only for one or two plays and all this different, like when he was asking us how much we got to see and all that kind of stuff. One play, one period. But the fact that it came from him and the fact that, this was, this guy is a wide receiver. Like I've seen, like the Pat Terrell as an example. Like you've seen this before where guys play both in high school and maybe they start off as a receiver, like guys who have some issues with consistency catching the ball as a wide receiver. It's kind of like the old joke. You see them move to the defensive side of the ball. And like when you look at some of the film that you see on Lorenzo Style, now granted it's high school film, but still like a very physical type corner. And as Brian talked about last week, a press corner in high school. And like if you can do that in high school, then why not give it a shot? He's got the body for it. We saw some physicality out of him last week, and he looks like he's really got the knack for it. And so, like, to me, the fact that it started with the head coach as his idea, it's just like there's some more merit to it, I think. And Freeman did say that, there's a good chance that we'll get to see him out there playing some defense on Saturday. So you're more looking forward to seeing that or seeing him as a receiver, because he's probably going to do a little bit of both?
I would actually be more inclined to see him at wide receiver. And Michael Johnson beat me to the point in the chat that I wanted to get to is I think it'll do something for him mentally. I think last season really did a number on him mentally, and being at corner, like it's just more reactionary. It's more playing, and it's just there's less to know. And I think that could potentially benefit him and just allow him to play more as a natural athlete. And, you talk about guys who go from wide receiver to corner and how it benefits them. I mean, look at Trayvon Diggs. He's an all-pro cornerback. And the reason why he has such good ball skills is because he started out, playing wide receiver. And I think that is something that, not that, those two are so similar, but like Lorenzo Styles playing defense, playing corner, having the physicality to press, having the speed to be able to run man on man. I think it's something that is very beneficial for his game because, again, I just think it'll allow him to think less and just play more and really enjoy kind of just playing football again.
Yeah, and like Chi-Town says he could play dime and split end. I will be curious to see like how long this experiment continues, because I would think that if they're willing to put him out there in the spring game defensively, like one, you've got some leeway to do that. But if they're willing to do that, that means they have to at least be giving it, some serious consideration, more than just a couple plays during practice here and there. Like, so what's he going to work on this summer? Like, how much is he going to work on that? How much would he continue to split time versus do you move him over there full time defensively if you decide to go in on it? Because, that's, again, a guy who did it in high school, but hasn't done it for the last couple of years at the college level. And also the chance to work, more with Mike Mickens and what Mickens has been able to do with the guys at that position. Like, would there be enough to keep him there playing both ways, or would you want him to stick to one side? I guess would be my question.
I think I would ultimately prefer someone who is just committed to one side or the other. And I think the only thing that I would like in terms of flexibility is if he does decide to commit 100% to offense, I think it would be okay to see him and maybe in some like dime or nickel packages ultimately. But if he goes strictly defense, I wouldn't want to see him worrying about the offensive side of the ball, because again, I think that's where a lot of his struggles comes from. I think he's just he's just been thinking too much and getting himself so worked up about, running the perfect route or being in the perfect position and, not knowing, where to be sometimes. And so again, at corner, you're just really, am I in man or am I in zone? And if I'm in zone, what part of the field am I, responsible for? And I think that's a lot easier than kind of, what entails to be an elite wide receiver.
Yeah, and that'll take us into the next topic. Virginia Tech grad transfer Kaleb Smith, of course, announced his retirement from football Saturday. So scale of 1 to 10, how does it affect your concern level for the wide receiver position for the Irish?
Yeah, so if 10 was like ultimately the most amount of concern, I would say that my concern level would be at like a solid 2 or 3. And ultimately, it doesn't provide much concern for me being at a 2 or 3. The only thing that I think that they lose is just veteran experience. Some of those,
right.
And I think Tobias ultimately, I mean, it's not even a question. He's more athletic. He's going to be a better wide receiver than Kaleb, but what Kaleb provides is maybe stuff that Tobias hasn't thought about in the film room, or stuff that, a veteran can say, hey, when a safety is maybe lined up like this, you might want to think this sort of thing, or hey, maybe you notice the corner is doing this, that might be a tendency that leads to this. So the only thing I'm concerned about them losing again is just, some sort of veteran experience and just a guy who's played in a lot of games so far. He can provide insight for some of these younger wide receivers. But when we're talking like overall ability, catch making ability, athleticism, that kind of stuff, overall ceiling as a wide receiver, I'm just not concerned at all, really.
Mine is a 1 for this reason, because of some of the things that you just talked about, and 2, because of coming into this spring, Kaleb Smith was, had more experience than anyone at wide receiver on the roster for the Irish. And the second most experienced guy was Lorenzo Styles. So now we're talking about a guy who just left the program and a guy who could be at the very least splitting time at cornerback, if not moving to cornerback. But we've not talked about either one of those guys for anything that we've seen or heard, or even on highlights from this spring. Like, we haven't talked about seeing anything from either one of those guys, and it's not a knock on them. We haven't, we haven't been talking about them. It's been Tobias Merriweather, it's been Chris Tyree, it's been Dion Colsey. All these other guys are the ones who have stood out at the wide receiver group so far. So, like, obviously wish Kaleb Smith the best, and hopefully things work out for him, based on kind of this, some of the stuff that was in his announcement from Saturday. But it doesn't strike me an overwhelming concern. I think that we thought that they were going to need to lean on him a bit more coming into the spring practice, but that's not the way it turned out. And, again, like he's retiring and Lorenzo Styles might be moving to corner. So I think there's so much upside to the rest of that group. Like the floor, I think is still really high for this group. And like Chris Tyree has been doing good things out there. And that's been like the bonus addition to this group as well, is getting Chris Tyree as a receiver. So I think there's too much upside between them and what we talked about with some stuff with the quarterbacks. So not a real high level of concern for me either. And as Derek said, gained a scholarship as well. So, that'll be something to kind of watch when spring ends. May 1st, how many weeks we got? Got 2 weeks. Transfer portal is going to open up. So Notre Dame women's basketball added a three-point shooting Fordham grad transfer guard Anna DeWolf today. And meanwhile, Van-Allen Lubin from the Irish men's basketball team announced he is entering the transfer portal. Think it's a bigger gain for the women or a bigger loss for the men?
I think it's a bigger gain for the women overall. Last season, their kind of spot up 3-point shooter got hurt, towards the beginning, middle of the season. And you're going to always need, someone to knock down the shots. And when you have someone like Sonia Citron, and oh man, I can't think of Olivia Miles. When you have those two who are such good facilitators of the ball, not really known for being knockdown shooters, they're going to draw a lot of attention and coverage, especially as they're moving with the ball. And that's naturally going to lead to maybe some more double teams. And so when you have someone who you can kick it out to in the corner and be that knockdown shooter, I think that's a great overall addition. And then when you start looking at the men's side of things, I mean, the whole roster is scrapped. And so when you look at a guy like Lubin, yeah, sure, he was great to have, and he's a great, recruit and overall talent. But I mean, Mike is just going to kind of tear down that whole roster and build it up how he pleases. And sure, would have been a little bit easier with someone like Lubin. Yeah. But they're not in any serious contention next season to run the table. And I think it's very, the women had high expectations this year. And, because of some of those injuries down the stretch, they just weren't as deep as they'd like to be. And then when you bring back, who they're getting, and then they're bringing in some of these, these stud freshman players, like the girl who was the McDonald's, MVP of the game, All-American MVP, and then you bring in a lethal 3-point shooter. I think it just builds up the fact that, the expectation, I think, next year for the women's team is Final Four or better out of the gate. And when you can add a 3-point shooter like that, it only kind of, it just strengthens you that much more overall.
Yeah, DeWolf was the Atlantic 10 Player of the Year a couple of years ago. She averaged over 20 points a game as a sophomore, and hit like 70. I think it was 73 3-pointers this season. And she's been all A10 the last 3 years at Fordham. And to be able to get her and all the things that you talked about, like they needed another legitimate 3-point threat, and you get that now. So you've got Citron, who is a really good percentage 3-point shooter, a little bit more volume after the injury to Mabry. But so now you're going to have two there. Rish coming in, the freshman, another 3-point shooter. The backcourt is going to be really deep, and the key piece is still finding someone else in the front court after you lose Lauren Ebo. And I saw that Michael Johnson was talking about the player from DePaul, and there's so many players in the transfer portal. I have no idea which way they're stretching right now. But so I agree with what you're saying. I think that the bigger gain is for the women than the loss for the men, because this was going to be such a rebuild for Micah Shrewsbury anyway. You would like to have a guy like Lubin. The timing of this is weird because it's been 3 weeks now at this point, hasn't it, since Shrewsbury was hired, and you're pretty deep into the transfer portal window at this point. So I was just kind of surprised to see this announcement now, but ultimately, again, this was going to be such a big rebuild for Shrewsbury anyway, that I don't think this is ultimately going to be a huge loss in the short term for the Irish men's program to see Lubin leave. You're right. I mean, he is a good player, but I don't think it's going to be, a resounding loss for them.
Yeah, they need to be, the men's issue just goes deeper than losing, one really good player. And I think that's ultimately what it is. And like, do I think Van Leuven is overall like if there was a way to, basically say if Leuven and this transfer were equal, I would say Leuven's game is better and he's more elite. But what she provides overall to a team aspect of things and where the team can go next season, I just find it way more impactful.
I agree. Fill in the blank. Cody Bellinger made his return to Los Angeles with the Cubs this weekend. Before stepping into the batter's box for his first at-bat Friday night, Dodgers fans gave him a standing ovation. And so Bellinger kind of paused for a second to soak it in before he stepped into the batter's box. Well, not so fast, because home plate umpire Jim Wolf gave Bellinger a strike because of a pitch clock violation, and that is blank.
That's just absurd. This is a guy who was a rookie of the year with the Dodgers. He was an MVP, with the Dodgers. He won a World Series with the Dodgers. He won a Silver Slugger, a Gold Glove. I mean, he's got an entire trophy case, dedicated with his time with the Dodgers. And I'm sure that it being his first time back and, being on a 1-year deal with the Cubs, like, it was an emotional situation for him. Like, it was probably his home, and he probably never considered the fact that he would play for another team. And so it's absurd with these new pitch clock rules. Like, there's got to be exceptions. It's just one pitch. It's not like he's stepping out of the box every time and he's getting this ovation. And I think it must have ticked him off, because later in the game he robbed Jason Hayward of a shot to center field where he brought back a home run in a 1-0 game. So, and I think he turned to the fans and they were booing him, and he just chuckled, at that point, because he goes from, the standing ovation, and then of course when it comes down to it and he's robbing the Dodgers of a home run, then how the tides quickly turn. But it's just, it's stupid overall, and it's just, it's like, just have some common sense. When the situation calls for it, allow a guy to just soak in the moment a little bit.
Yeah, it's example 1,554 why umpires should not think that fans are
they
there
just want
to
to
see
run
them
the game.
umpire. Yes, and it's like, I get it. You've been told about this pitch clock and the the rules of the pitch clock and all that.
But you really
Know
think the
the
MLB
moment,
is going to
though.
call you and say, "Hey, we're pissed at you for allowing
Right.
Bellinger to get a little ovation in"?
That's right. Know the moment. Like, he had a successful run as a Los Angeles Dodger. He was obviously part of the World Series championship team, and now it's early in the season and he is back there in LA with a new team. It's a total joke that something like this would happen. It's like, and it might, maybe it's just a good fan strategy with the pitch clock. Maybe the first at bat of every game, like, fans should just stand up and give a standing ovation to like a guy from the other team and
Get an
see
immediate
if he,
strike.
get a strike on him right away. So total joke, and it's just another umpire that needs to get over himself, unfortunately. So, hey, good weekend for the Cubs, though, taking 2 out of 3 out there.
First time that they've won a series in LA in a very long time. And Anthony says, as a Cardinals fan, I enjoy anytime the Cubs have a negative issue. And I'm enjoying the Cardinals ERA right now as a pitching staff, and the fact that Wilson Contreras is not performing as well as Yan Gomes this season. I think that's a really good benefit.
Yes, thank you, Derek. Michael is saying, talk about Notre Dame football. Michael, if you're new to the show, welcome. This is the part of the show where we talk about things other than Notre Dame football. So
we just had a real nice hour conversation about Notre Dame football.
We literally talked for an hour about Notre Dame football. A lot of things regarding the quarterbacks and everything else. We're getting late in the show here. This is called Rapid Fire. We talk about a lot of different things, and we started Rapid Fire off with Notre Dame football. So we talk about things in Rapid Fire that aren't all Notre Dame football. I'm sorry. So, but again, there are plenty of archive shows in the start of this show where we literally spent a full hour talking about Sam Hartman, Tyler Buckner, quarterbacks, wide receivers, everything else. We've talked a lot of Notre Dame football today, but again, enjoyed your cowboy hat. But if you're new, like, just catch you up on the format a little bit. Speaking of something that is not Notre Dame football, there is a new character on the hit TV show Ted Lasso this season named Zava. Jesse, do you buy or sell Aaron Rodgers as the real life Zava?
I actually, I buy this more than I sell it. And I think it's a really funny comparison because, on Ted Lasso, this new Zava guy is kind of picked up and he's like, the greatest kind of soccer player at the time right now. And he's bounced around to a lot of different teams. And he's just this real kind of self-centered, I'm Zava, ball goes to me. And then he's got all these kind of like holistic, like he's always sitting in a circle, like meditating or just kind of doing these off-brand kind of holistic things. And that reminds me a lot of Aaron Rodgers in the past few seasons as he's gone on these like retreats and trying all these different like mental escape stuff that he's got going on. And so do I think that Zava is as crazy and as self-centered and toxic as Aaron Rodgers is? No, but I think it is a pretty good like comparison of if Zava was a current NFL player, who would he be most like? It's got to be Aaron Rodgers.
But when you look at, when you look at Zava from like, I don't even know, like, is that, I don't think it's a man bun, or whatever you I don't know what you call that. He's got like a little sprout, like would be ponytail in the back and he's got the scraggle.
Yeah.
And, like you see him like he's like looking in the mirror and getting in his car. It's like it reminded me of Michael Jordan was a host of Saturday Night Live. I don't know. It's probably been at least 30 years ago now, but he did like this whole thing. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And doggone it, people like me. It was like the whole thing. And it's like Zava looking in the mirror, giving himself, like reassurance. And then he,
affirmations.
The affirmations and trying to psych himself up. But, that's when he's in his private time. But as soon as he goes out in the public, he puts on this persona,
exactly.
Like he's the greatest. I can totally see that being Aaron Rodgers, like literally, like the most actual insecure guy in sports. And, but then, like behind the scenes, and then he goes out, in public and he's doing his Aaron Rodgers stuff and everything else. We appear to have lost Jesse there for, so I completely I would not be surprised if, because Jason Sudeikis, who of course is the star of Ted Lasso and, is also one of the writers on the show, I would not be surprised if they actually based Zava on Aaron Rodgers, like what they think Aaron Rodgers is behind the scenes. So I completely buy it for me. All right, today is National Blah, Blah, Blah Day. I had never heard of this until today. It's a day to encourage people to listen to those nagging words from your loved ones or friends and to put action to those words. So, what sports figure most needs to listen up and pay attention to the advice they're being given on National Blah, Blah, Blah Day?
So I am going to be upfront and honest. I read this question wrong at first. So I would appreciate if we let you go first on this one.
What did you think I said here?
I thought the question was like, if you could take advice from any, like if you could take advice, not give advice, if you could get advice from someone, not who needs to listen to the advice that like everyone else is.
Oh, like who would you want to get advice from? You can go with that as well. I mean, I tell you what, there's a couple here. I'm not gonna. I'll see if maybe you end up going with this other one. I'll just say Lamar Jackson, because like Lamar Jackson, I think, like, especially when you look at the contract that Jalen Hurts just signed, like Jalen Hurts has an agent. He has an intermediary. He has a go-between between him and the teams. And Lamar, like everyone is kind of heaping a lot of this stuff on, why won't the Ravens sign Lamar Jackson? Well, maybe Lamar Jackson should just hire an agent, and that would take care of some of this stuff. Like maybe you should listen to, all this that's out there right now. So I would go with Lamar Jackson.
See, I'm still like, that's it. Like my brain just can't come to anyone right now, and I don't know what's going on.
Well, the other one would be Jerry Jones, because like.
That would be a very, I do.
That was who I thought you would probably start, and it was like, it was just set up there, like a softball.
It was a nice tee.
basically. Yeah, that's right. Like that was the first one that came to mind, but I thought, for all of our regulars, who hear us beat, that drum too much, I thought that I would get away. But like Jerry Jones is the easy one, like the guy who still thinks that he's the general manager and continues to do the same old things again and again and again. Maybe you should just listen to some of the people, who, would tell you, hey, maybe you should, actually hire a real general manager and not make it a family business. I don't know.
So yeah, I guess I'll just go the route of who I would take advice from, like as a player, and how that would translate to my game. And I think that the most beneficial would be someone like David Ortiz, just being a guy that was a pure hitter his whole life. That's someone I would very much want to listen to because pure hitting was my thing. That's what I was really good at too. And just outside of baseball too, I think he's a good character person. The way he speaks.
So you would want to listen to him? Okay.
That's the person I would want to take the advice from, not someone who should listen to the advice that everyone is giving him or her.
Right. All right. I like that. All right. Well, just for our new friend Michael, we got a super chat, and I appreciate that from, I don't know.
Relic.
What's that?
Looks like the name is Relic.
Relic? Okay. Thanks for the super chat. Would you rather have an 11-win season and lose a close New Year's Six bowl with Hartman, or a 10-win season and a decent bowl with Buckner?
I'm going to go 11 wins in a New Year's Six. Notre Dame hasn't been able to accomplish that New Year's Six bowl win in a very long time. I think that is, if you're not going to
lose a close New Year's Six bowl, you're losing the New Year's Six bowl. Yeah. So that means you're 11-1
or 10-2.
Right.
But then you're going to be 11-3 and 11-2 by the time it's
11-2. You're going to finish 11-2.
Right.
If you lose the New Year's Six.
I really don't know. Like, I think neither would be a true win. And I guess the question ultimately stems from, like, would you rather, allow Buckner to develop more and assuming that he's going to transition into the starting quarterback role after Hartman leaves? And so it's like, okay, are you really satisfied with just one more win, essentially? And then can that, mediocre bowl make up for it? This is like a real, like, trick question in my opinion. And I don't know if there's a good answer. And I think it's a great question overall. But to me, I would still ride with Hartman because I think he gives you the best chance of ultimately winning the national championship at the end of the year. And I know that's not part of the question, but I'm going to ride and die with Hartman no matter what, because I think the ultimate goal is championships, and that's who's going to give you a better chance at the championship.
Yeah, based on what the actual goal is to get into the college football playoff and win a college football playoff semifinal, get to the national championship game, and obviously ultimately win a national championship. Based on all that, it would be Hartman, because I do think that's who gives them the best chance to do that this year. Now, based on this hypothetical that is being posed here, winning the national championship is already off the table. So, like, if I know that going in and I have to base it on this hypothetical, I would go with the Buckner option, because it's a year of experience, a full season of experience for Buckner, and that ultimately sets you up for the next year to give you a better chance to win a national championship.
Right. And so in this specific question, I would go with Buckner, because you're basically saying that with both of them, you're almost achieving the same thing, falling short of the playoffs, falling short of a big, bowl game win. And so if that means that, Buckner would get the year of experience, then that would set him up for a better position next year and ultimately put Notre Dame in a better position, then yeah, I would go with Buckner. But I don't, again, going back to how I answered before this, I think Hartman gives them the better shot, and that's who I want to ride with this season.
Right. Josh says 11 wins, they're going to the playoff. 10 wins, it's a New Year's Six bowl. That's, if you lose a game, yeah, I mean, I would say you probably have around a 97, 98% chance to get into the playoffs with 11 wins if you're 11-1, but there is always the outside chance of, like, say, both Ohio State and Michigan, getting in, or two SEC teams getting in, those kind of, but, ultimately, if it comes down to, if you've got one or two undefeated teams at the top, and then you've got, 4 one-loss teams behind them, there is always a chance, someone is going to get left out in that scenario. So there's always like odds are in your favor that you're going to make the playoffs with one loss, but there is still a chance you will miss based on how many other teams are sitting there with the same record, because then you have to start, dissecting resumes and all that kind of stuff. So good question, though. Good hypothetical. And we were able to wrap it up with a bonus Notre Dame football question at the end. So glad for that. Jess, appreciate you jumping in tonight. I will talk to you. Now we've got he's slipping in super chats right before the buzzer. Thanks for one more. If you could handpick a non-quarterback player on the current roster to break into the top 10 Heisman candidates type of season, who would it be?
Tobias Merriweather.
You're going Tobias Merriweather. I'm going Audric Estime would be mine.
See, the only rebuttal I'd have to that is the run game is proven, and I think that they're going to have a successful run game regardless. But if they can get an elite wide receiver to take over and really boost Sam Hartman's game and then ultimately balance out the pass run game, I think that's more so my thought process.
And Merriweather could return punts. I was going to say, like, typically for a wide receiver, I'm saying typically because I know we just had a wide receiver win a Heisman a couple years ago, and I can't remember. Did Smith?
Devontae?
Did he return punts at Alabama? I can't remember if he did or not. But it seemed like most of what he did as a receiver. Like, my point was going to be, like whether it's like a Rocket Ismail or a Tim Brown or some of these other guys, like you need the return part of it because that gives you highlight type stuff, that's going to catch people's eye in terms of Heisman and stuff like that. Johnson is saying Logan Diggs. Derek is saying Buckner, but the question was non-quarterback player on the roster. Derek, come on, listen up. Stay out of your
Scotch,
your grandma's moonshine there. All right, good questions there at the end, and we appreciate the super chats there at the end. Morrison would be an interesting one as well, if he could have the same kind of season. I'm going to say he's going to have a hard time duplicating the interceptions because I think that he's going to be someone that they're going to want to avoid throwing it. But you're going to have to pick your poison when Cam Hart is healthy. You're going to have to pick your poison who you're going to throw it. They're going to have to throw it somebody. So it's going to be really, really fun and really interesting to watch that secondary this season. Jesse, I will talk to you later. Enjoyed it. And we will talk to you later as well. Hit the like button on your way out and subscribe, rate, and review. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.
Don't forget to do those